Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we are going to be continuing on with our Swift programming tutorial series, and in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at variables in Swift. Now, what exactly are variables? Well, variables are effectively placeholders that hold a specific value, and you have the ability to change them later on. That is in contrast to another topic we're going to look at today, and that is constants, where if you define a constant, that means the value you set will be the value that it has throughout the lifetime of your program, and you cannot change it. All right? We're also going to be taking a look at type inference. And to start off with, let's talk about what type inference is, actually. So, what exactly is type inference? Well, type inference is a feature built into the Swift compiler where it can determine what type your variables are without you having to explicitly tell it what the type is. So, if you have a variable called x, and you set it to a value of 10, Swift will automatically imply, using type inference, it'll infer that the value you gave it is an integer, so it will assign x the type of integer. Right? So that's pretty much how type inference works. And if we go into Xcode, we can go ahead and start creating variables. So let's go ahead and go into below our import foundation, and let's start by typing the var keyword, var standing for variable. So var. After var, we need to give our variable a name, so let's call this x. And we're going to use type inference for our x variable, so do a space equals space, and then now we need to give it a value. So this value can be any of 6 different types, as well as any other custom types that Swift provides or that you create. The 6 primitive types in Swift are strings, characters, integers, doubles, floats, and booleans. So we're going to set the value of x to 10, and that will tell Swift, hey, infer the type of this variable, and when Swift takes a look at x, it will say, oh, okay, that's an integer. And that's one of our primitive types, right? So let's talk also about the other types real quick. Starting off with the other primitive types in Swift. The other primitive types, in terms of numerics, I guess, are the float and double. Now, floats and doubles are similar in that they both can have a decimal place, but where they differ is their precision. And because of their precision, they take up different amounts of memory, right? So a double will take 8 bytes, whereas a float will take 6. Okay? And that's, again, primarily because of the precision. A double is much more precise than a float. So if you need to have an application where your values must be extremely precise, then a double is where you're going to want to lean, because those 2 extra bytes do matter quite a lot. You'll often find floats and other versions of them being used in games and stuff like that. But we're not going to be covering games or anything like that in Swift, right? So those are the other two numeric types in Swift. Let's take a look at examples of how we can create those. Right? So let's create a variable called y. And for y, we're going to explicitly specify the type using a type annotation. Now, to create the type annotation, right after our variable name, no spaces, do a colon, then do a space, and then we'll define this as a float. So capital F, L-O-A-T. And we'll set this value equal to 3 point, let's say, 5. So 3.5. Now you can see we have var y, and we're telling it explicitly that it's a float, and we're setting the value of this variable to 3.5. If you did not include the type annotation here, if you did not explicitly tell Swift that it's a float, it will assume that it is a double, and it will assign it a double, even if you in your mind or in your document that you're working from for when you're creating a project, for example, that if your specifications say that it should be a float, Swift isn't going to see it that way. It's going to automatically assign it as a double. So if you want something to be a float, you have to explicitly specify that. All right? Now, let's create a double, and we'll call that variable z. So on a new line, var z colon double equals, let's say, 3.14159. All right, so that is our double. Now, like I mentioned, a double takes up a little bit more memory than a float does because it's much more precise. We're not taking advantage of that precision here, but you will if you go into let's say machine learning type stuff. You're gonna need a lot of precision. Okay, so with that is our numeric types. Now let's talk about string and character. String and character are very similar in that they both use double quotes, but a character can only be just that, a singular character. Whereas a string is multiple characters. Now let's take a look at what that looks like. So let's say var name and we're going to say equals and here we'll say inside of quotes, right? Instead of quotes, we're going to say John Doe. Now, you can see in our variable, again, we are using type inference. We're not giving it the type of string explicitly. So Swift will automatically look at this and say, oh, okay, we got double quotes and we got multiple characters in between those quotes. So this has to be a string, and it assigns it a string. However, character, much like float, you have to specify the type explicitly because Swift will automatically assume, if you're using type inference, that anything between quotes is a string. Okay? So you can create a character like this. var, let's say middle initial colon character with a capital C equals, we'll say Z. Okay, now that we have a var called middle initial, we're giving it the type annotation of character with a capital C. Now Swift will see this as a character and not a string. Pretty cool. Now, our final type that we're going to take a look at is bool, or boolean. Now, what is a boolean? Well, a boolean essentially represents a true or a false value, on or off, 1 or 0, whatever, however you want to think about it. In Swift, we use true and false. In languages like let's say C, C uses 1 and 0, but in Swift we use a true and false, right? So to create a boolean, we can say var is drinking age equals, let's say they're 21. True. And there it is. So var is drinking age. Generally speaking, when we're creating booleans, they should start with something like is or does or has, because booleans are generally you can think of booleans as yes or no answers to questions. So, questions that begin with is or has or does generally insinuate that the answer should be a yes or a no or a true or false. So keep that in mind. That's a good rule of thumb. Now that we've talked about variables and the 6 different types of primitives, what about constants? Right? I told you that I was going to show you how to create a constant. Well, I'm going to stick to that. So, let's say I want to create a constant double called pi. Right? This would in fact be a perfect example of a constant, because pi obviously doesn't change, and you wouldn't want pi to change. So to do that, we need to use the let keyword. Let basically tells Swift, hey, this is a constant. Do not let anybody change this. In languages like JavaScript, let does something entirely different. Let in JavaScript, for example, doesn't create a constant. It has some scope. It has some scope ramifications, but other than that, it does the same thing as var in JavaScript. But we're not in JavaScript. We're in Swift, right? So let's go ahead and create this constant. Let pi, we're going to explicitly tell it it's a double, equals 3.1415 59. And so there we go. Let's print out all of our different variables so we can see them in the console. So to do that, we can do our print function. So print, let's say X. So print X like that. Print Y. Print Z. Okay, and then we'll say print name, print middle initial, and print is drinking age. All right. So go ahead and save that and run your code now. And you can see build succeeded. And in our console, we get all of our different values printed out. So that pretty much does it for this video, guys, on variables and constants. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.